Nobody gets up every day and says, I can't wait to get to the office and do less.
Talk to doctors. That's one of the things they're missing. They're not very clear on what their goals are going to be.
The most important thing that we measure when it comes to growth is that bottom line, that profitability. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Tony Feck, practicing dentist as well as the co-founder of Sunrise Dental Solutions, a company designed to help our practice owner clients achieve their financial visions through their dental practices. I've been practicing dentistry for 40 years and working as a consultant and a coach for the last 25 years. I'm joined today by Dr. Chris Phelps.
Hi, Tony. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Chris Phelps. I'm one of the practice coaches at Sunrise Dental Solutions. And as Tony mentioned, our purpose in life is to get you more or less. More of the things that you want more of. New patients, more practices, more profitability, and less of the things you don't want more of. Less headaches, less staff issues, less expense, so to speak. So we're excited that you're joining us for this new channel and this new endeavor where you've got a lot of great content coming your way.
Great, Chris. Okay, so today's topic is mid-year review, assessing your practice growth. You know, during the course of a busy day in a dental practice, about all we have time for is just taking care of our patients and all the other things, all the other obligations that accompany being a practice owner. But occasionally we need to pause and assess how we're doing, how we are accomplishing our purpose in our practice. It's hard to believe that the year is already a half over. But if we look at the title of today's episode, there are two key words. One is assessment, and the other is growth. Let's look at the second word first. What is growth, and why does it matter? Well, I think we all would rather grow than shrink. I think we would all rather increase rather than decline. Nobody gets up every day and says, I can't wait to get to the office and do less or not do as much. So I think it's pretty obvious that growing is important. You can basically do one of three things. You can decline, you can stay the same, or you can increase.
Oh, growth is extremely important, Tony. But I think it's going to be important to define that for those watching one more step or one more level. Because I know in my own practices in Charlotte, North Carolina, I had a growth mindset as soon as I got out of dental school back in 2003. And that was just to do more, like get more practices. So I had a growth mindset, but what I didn't realize was it was growth for growth's sake. And what I was missing in that and adding multiple offices was a key factor of what we talk about, what we mean really when we say growth. And that's profitability. Right. And so I realized at that time at a key point in my career that I had to change my mindset from growing for growth's sake to maximizing the capacity and the profitability of my offices instead.
Yeah, and in that lies the genesis, if you will, of Sunrise Dental Solutions. There were a lot of companies out there designed just to do more, but it was mainly focused on helping them produce more. And producing more doesn't necessarily mean that you end up with more. If you produce more, but yet your expenses go up and or you don't collect as higher percentage of what you produce, then it's just additional work. So when it comes right down to it, the most important thing that we measure when it comes to growth is that bottom line, that profitability.
Definitely. And a lot of times what we find with people when it comes to growth, again, they think, well, growth, profitability is great, but that just means to drive that, I need a bigger patient base. Right, Tony? I got to have more patients to get in there to get to this growth that I need. But ultimately, if growth it doesn't follow with profitability, right? They're not on the same tangent. Well, then that could be a roadblock to your success as well. We've worked with practices that had small new patient numbers per month, and yet were some of the most profitable practices in the country. And yet we've seen some with 100 to 200, 300 new patients per month, still barely making it and trying to survive. So defining that growth is going to be key with new patients. That's important, but ultimately goes back to that profitability.
Yeah, so how do we know we're growing? Well, we have to know our numbers. I'm a numbers person, but I appreciate that not all dentists are. Here's what I know for sure. After 40 years of being a dental practice owner, I can tell you that dental practice owners who know their numbers are more successful. There's the old saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. So, what should we be measuring? If you're a practice owner and I ask you certain questions about key practice monitors, you should know within a relatively close amount what those numbers are. So let's review those. So what would you consider, Chris, on your list that every practice owner should be measuring?
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's lots of great metrics out there, right? If you looked at key point indicators, or maybe you have a software that brings up a lot of these things on a dashboard in front of your mind, in front of your face, it can be a little distracting, right? It can be a little overwhelming, because where do you focus your attention? Because there's so many metric points that you could dial into. Our purpose is that, yes, metrics are important, but not every metric, right? We want key metrics to follow and keep that focus on. So definitely for me, I know production is a big one, right? We have to know what we're producing. At the same time, we have to look at what are we collecting, right? Because producing is great, but if we're not collecting anything, well, then we're working for the insurance companies or for the patients, and that's not good either. So collections, productions are key, as well as that new patient count. But for me, with new patient count, it's not only how many are we getting, but also keeping an eye on how many are we losing each month as well.
Yeah, and those are the big ones, okay? But it's not the entire picture. So if we look at those three indices, production, collection, and new patient, we not only need to know how many, but we need to compare that against our historical number. Because again, this is about growth. And how do we know we're growing? Because we've got more than we had at some previous point. So our numbers need to not only tell us how many, how much, but they also need to tell us how does this compare to the past. We also need to know how this compares to our goals. If I were to ask you what your goals are for your practice, I'm sure you would come up with an answer pretty quickly. But if I would have asked you to attach some numbers to that question, then maybe it wouldn't be so quick. Maybe you'd have to think about that. Well, I maintain that you should already know what your goal is. Chris, in your experience in working with dentists, where do dentists usually find these goals? How do they arrive at these?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oftentimes when we talk to doctors, that's one of the things they're missing, right? They're not very clear on what their goals are going to be, both in the short term or in the long run. So starting that conversation early on and figuring it out and getting a commitment from them on where they want to go is key. Because as the old adage says, if you don't know where you want to go, it's going to be hard to get there.
And what I often hear is some number. And I say, where did you get that number? And they'll say, well, 10% increase to me sounds like a good increase. I say, well, do you have a budget? And there's usually this blank stare, okay, in return. And they'll say, well, yeah. And I say, well, tell me about your budget. And they really don't have a budget. They pick this number out of thin air. And I maintain that any business owner, I don't care if it's a dental practice owner or you own a pizza restaurant, then you should have a budget for your business. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be done by an accountant. It's a fairly simple and straightforward instrument. It's simply what it's going to cost to run your practice, what you need to take out of that practice as a practice owner to accomplish your lifestyle, your taxes, your retirement, your long-term goals, a personal contingency account, a vacation and discretionary account. You need to cover all of those things. And now add all that up and you know how much money you need to collect. And then if you know your collection rate, which is another key practice monitor, this is the percentage of your production that you collect, then you can arrive at what you need to produce. And if you've done this for a year, you can divide that by 12 to get your monthly figure. If you know how many days worked a month, which again is another key practice indicator, is dentists, we eat what we kill. Okay? We're only making dentistry when the lights are on, handpiece is running, office is open. So we have to be open a certain number of days every month. But if we know how many days, we can divide that by our monthly production goal to get our daily goal. Once we get our daily goal, then it's just a matter of dividing that amount among the various providers, the hygienists and the dentists working in the practice.
Yeah, so think about that, guys, what Tony just said. So it's your, goals should not be built around what you feel like they should be or what you read on social media that they should be, right? They should be built around solid foundational things like knowing what your true expenses are. What does it cost to keep the lights on in your practice? And then what are the things you want to do with your practice and in your life? What the kind of lifestyle you want to live? So once you have hard numbers of what it costs to keep those lights on every day, then it becomes a lot easier to set that daily goal and now reverse engineer the lifestyle that you really want to have.
Yeah, so we're building the foundation for how you can really do a great job of measuring how you are performing. Okay? This measurement needs to be calibrated. Okay? You need a method by which you know how you're doing relative to how you need to do. So let's review where we are. We need to measure how many days that we work. We need to measure our production, and that needs to be measured against the past. It needs to be measured against our goals. We need to measure our collections as well, compared to the past, as well as our goals. And we need to measure this important characteristic, collection rate, the percentage of production that we actually collect. Obviously, the higher the collection rate, the better. We also need to measure our accounts receivable. Okay? The money that is owed to us, we'd like to keep that money as small as possible, as current as possible. And we need to measure new patients. Okay? New patients by month, new patients year to date, compared against historical, compared against our goal, and broken down by source. Now, fortunately, I have on this episode one of the people who, in my opinion, know more about how to attract new patients than anyone in dentistry. In fact, he wrote the book. I can see the book from here. So, Chris, let's talk briefly, and this is a whole episode all by itself, probably a series of episodes. But talk briefly about how we track new patients and how knowing where those new patients come from matters.
Yeah, it definitely matters. And this resonates with me more than many. As I mentioned, I had 4 dental practices at one time and made a bold move to buy back my time and increase my free time and profitability by selling my 2 best offices and taking over my 2 worst offices. Now, I know on the front end that may sound weird. Wait, how can you gain more profitability and get more free time by taking over your 2 worst offices? Well, it wasn't from day one, but that came through time, effort, and energy. But when I did that, I found myself spending $36,000 a month, per month, guys, on dental marketing to get 60 new patients for my efforts, 30 at one office and 30 at another office, right? So, Tony, you don't have to be a marketing major or a math expert to realize that's probably not a good check to write every month, right? Not much of a return is coming back for that. So, but what it did was it was a gorilla in the room that I couldn't ignore anymore, and I had to dig in and figure it out to really understand what marketing is and what are the things I needed to track. And that was a key thing. And just by getting my team to ask that simple question with every potential new patient phone call, it at least starts that process. And it's a very simple question. How did you hear about us, right? And documenting that so you can track that per patient that is actually coming in the door. If they say that they came in from Google, okay, ask some more qualifying questions. Did you see it somewhere else and Google our name? Did you Google a certain keyword or phrase? Because, when your target market speaks, that stuff is gold, right? That is great information you can use to find more just like them. Put better optimization on your websites for those keywords your patients are actually searching for.
Yeah, and you bring up a very important point, and I don't have to sell our listeners on the idea that marketing is expensive. Anybody who markets understands you can spend a lot of money on marketing. If you are tracking how your marketing is working, then you can make decisions about, do I need to change the marketing? Do I need to do more of the marketing?
Now, if we want to take it a step further, right, from just asking that simple question, we can back it up and use what we call tracking numbers. So these are unique telephone numbers that are dispersed along all of your tracking, your marketing sources. So a unique number for your website, a unique number for your direct mail campaign, a unique number for your digital marketing and advertisements. So that way, each of those calls are not only recorded, but you've got a dashboard you can log into to see, well, how many calls did I actually get from my radio ad versus how many calls come in from my website versus how many calls actually come in from that pay-per-click source. And with that call tracking number, you can actually discern the good, the bad, and the ugly of your current marketing efforts. What's working, what's not working, and why.
One of the things, Chris, you alluded to early on is this concept of more and less. We want more of what we want, less of what we don't want. We would love to be able to work less and make more. Okay? And people often think that that is some kind of fairy tale. No, it's not a fairy tale. In fact, it's one of the primary objectives of Sunrise Dental Solutions. Okay? Anybody can come in and say, hey, okay, you can make more. Just work twice as much. Okay? No, nobody wants to do that, right? So if you believe, like I think Chris mentioned, and I believe certainly, that most of the dentistry that you do in your practice comes from a new patient, from their first year that they are part of your practice. Okay, these are the large cases. People say, well, how do you work less and make more? Well, one of the ways you do this is by doing larger cases. And again, larger cases tend to come from the patient's first year in the dental practice. So if we can get more new patients, we're likely to have more opportunity to do big cases. But there's also this concept of quality of new patient. Not all patients are created equal when it comes to their value to the productivity of your schedule. So Chris, if you'll just speak to this value of a new patient concept a little more.
Yeah, and kind of what I picture of a quality new patient is somebody who's going to pay my full fee either through their insurance and the difference that they need to pay, or if they're paying cash, or through a in-office membership plan. But ultimately, I'm getting my fee one way or another, and they come back and they keep returning to pay and pay again. Versus someone who comes for a single visit, let's say a low-cost special, and then nickel and dime you go on a treatment plan, and you never see or hear them again because they're on to the next special, right? That's not really a quality new patient. Yeah, I could probably put this cheap special out there and get a huge quantity of people, right? But if I'm constantly having to replace them and they're not coming back, that's that attrition rate we talked about earlier. If I keep losing these people, then it's a hamster wheel, right? It's a never-ending cycle that's just running around, spinning our wheels, okay? Just hoping that the next month will be better than the previous month before. But if we can find these marketing sources that bring in quality new patients, people who pay our rates and return, well, that's a game changer for most practices.
Yeah, and I think that's great. What I would add to that is these patients tend to say yes to treatment recommendations. These patients tend to need a lot of dentistry. I mean, it's wonderful if they're nice and they show up and they pay, but if you look in their mouth and it's perfect, okay, good for them, but that's not great for the business itself. So we would like to reach people who need the kind of dentistry that not only we want to do, but the kind of dentistry that is going to be best for the business.
Yeah, and that's why looking at that new patient value is key. The lower that new patient value is, you may be attracting healthy mouths, and that's okay. If your goal is to build a massive hygiene practice where you got 20 hygienists and a couple of dentists working. But if that's not your goal and you want to have more of that work-life balance, be there less, take on more, then yeah, your target market's going to look a little different. You're going to need to market define those reactive patients who've been putting this off, knowing it's going to cost them more time, money, and pain. But now they're ready, right? They're ready and make a commitment and take the next step.
Yeah, that's excellent stuff. Would love to spend more time with you talking about marketing, but we're talking about measuring. So there are a couple other things that are very important for the practice owner to measure. The next one are adjustments, write-offs. I call adjustments the silent killer of profitability, because this is dentistry that's been performed in your practice, but you can't collect it. And because you usually don't see it, because you're not measuring it, then you don't even know about it. But it's out there, and it's killing your profitability. Some practices are writing off, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars every month in production. And one of the big ones are PPOs. Okay. Now, let me qualify this. Some of you listening and watching to this are big into PPOs, and it's working for you. It can work for you. Okay. You need to do certain things to make these work. But I think all of us would agree, if we could get all the patients that we wanted without having to write off a big portion of our production because we participate in a plan, we would rather have a fee-for-service practice. And if you're interested in converting your PPO practice to your fee-for-service practice, call us, because it's almost always right to do. Sometimes it isn't. And if it is right to do, there's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way to do it, and the wrong way to do it can cost you severely. But for those who do it the right way, it can be liberating. But that tends to be the big one. But there are other things that we write things off. We write things off for bad debts. We write employee dentistry off. We write senior discounts off. I think we need to be a little more selective with senior discounts. I mean, who has all the money in the world? Typically seniors, okay? I always thought it would be more appropriate to give like a young family starting discount if we're going to truly try to help people who don't have money. But Anyway, it's, all of these write-offs are good. Some write-offs are better than others. Some write-offs actually lead to more production and eventually more profitability, like marketing adjustments. Okay, if we have an incentive, a call to action offer that drives good quality new patients into the practice, then to me that's a good adjustment.
Yeah, and here's a good example of that, Tony. So one of the best marketing things I ever did offers was I did a promotion called Clean Teeth, Clean Car. Well, in essence, I advertised for, hey, this month only, any new patient that comes in and gets an exam, cleaning, x-rays, that they paid for, of course, we'll wash and detail your car for free, right? So I had a mobile car wash guy lined up, and that's what we did for any new patient that came in on specific days. And, of course, I started and targeted days where we had the most cancellations, no shows, or it was hard to fill that schedule on that day, right? Because if I'm going to fill any day, we start there. And then it added other days. And that promotion was so popular because it's a scratch two things off people's list. Oh, wait, I can go to this dental office and just get my teeth cleaned, but over here I can get my teeth cleaned and my car washed. Hey, two things off my list, check and check. Well, what it did was it brought quality people who not only paid that full fee, but it excited them. I literally had a patient come in and was so excited when she had gone through our experience, family of four kids, so 5 of them total, or 6 of them total. She went back to her minivan and she came back inside and asked to use our phone. And I asked her, why? Was everything okay? And she goes, we talked about my 4 kids and how crazy it is and hectic my life is. She goes, I'm going to tell you right now, my minivan has never been that clean. And you guys just did that for me. I'm calling 3 of my friends right now, with families, right, to come in to see you. So literally 3 family referrals on the spot. And that was just one of many stories like that I can tell you. And what did that cost me? Well, what was that adjustment, right? $15 to $25 per car. So how many of you would take that adjustment? Make a $15 to $25?
Sign me up. Yeah.
Right? Only on days that end in Y.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great story. Okay, so next thing we need to measure is what it costs us to run our business. Okay, we call this expenses or overhead. Okay, the industry definition for overhead is the percentage of collections that you spend to operate your dental practice. And when I ask a lot of dentists what their overhead is, they'll give me some round number. If it's divisible by 5, then usually it means they don't really know. Okay, it's just an educated guess. Chris, what do you think? And I don't expect you to know this because I wouldn't have known it if I didn't Google it. But what do you think the average overhead of a dentist practice owner in the U.S. is?
The average overhead we're talking a single practitioner practice, right? I'm going to say it's got to be, this is sad, but I would say it's probably higher than 85%.
It actually is 73%. Now, I hear 85%. Okay, believe it or not, I do hear that sometimes. But it's the impact of overhead is often not truly realized until you do the numbers. I did a presentation for the Seattle Study Club Symposium earlier this year, and my message was on the profitability formula, which is production times collection rate minus expenses equals profitability. And I was looking at each of those components of that formula with the goal of taking home $1 million a year. I mean, in Sunrise Dental Solutions, we have something called the 7 Club. And these are when all the practice owners are taking home at least 7 figures. Believe it or not, we had to start a new club called the 8-Figure Club, which is 8 figures. I know that is, obscene kind of stuff, but it tells you just how successful you can be if you just do the right things. Anyway, getting back to my message is that, if you want to take home 7 figures, what is more important, your collection rate or your overhead? And it turns out overhead trumps collection rate. So we've got dental practice owners, and these are general dentists. And this is not the endodontist with a 20% overhead. This is a general dentist. And they've got overhead that are in the 40s. They don't have to produce as much dentistry. They don't even have to collect as much of what they produce in order to make the same or more than someone who might be producing twice as much as they are. Now, I'm not an advocate about that. You go cheap on everything. You watch every penny and all of that. No, I'm on the best stuff. But you can do that, and you can do it smart, and then indirectly affect your bottom line. But they exist, and they make a huge difference. The last thing, Chris, that we measure, we've already referred to, is profitability. We need to know the bottom line. When I look at a Sunrise Dental Solutions report, we call them MARS, which stands for Monthly Assessment Report. And this is a document that measures 125 different practice statistics. And we get information from our practices. We don't get 125 numbers, but we'll get maybe 10 numbers that we request every month. And then from those 10 numbers, we can create the rest of this report. The last page is the most important page. And when I get this report every month, I always start there first. Now, you would never read a book like that, but that's how we read a client's report. We start there. And if that number is good, all the stuff in front of that is less meaningful. But if that number is not good, all the stuff in front of that number, we dissect. And we determine, okay, what is the reason for this profitability number that is not as good as we want? And once we know that, then we can create a plan. Okay, I know we're running short on time, so Chris, a few parting thoughts on growth and assessment.
Yeah, going back to the overhead thing, Tony is exactly right. There's obviously some things, when you break down overhead, there are fixed expenses and variable expenses, right? You can't change your lease rate, so to speak. That's a fixed thing. So we're not talking about trying to, negotiate and change things like that are out of your control. But there are so many things in your control that you could change for the better without sacrificing the quality of the dentistry that you do or the service that you provide your patients that can save you a lot of money. Okay, we're in this age now where there's more competition for everything, every service out there than ever before. So you do have options and you do have choices, right? I remember just changing my telephone system one time. Not only did I get a better telephone system, I went from spending $1,500 a month to spending $400 a month. Add that up over 12 months, that's a big change in profitability. So don't think there's these massive things you got to change to increase your overhead or decrease your overhead and increase your profitability. Like most things, it's the small things you can change that have the biggest results for you and that bottom line as well. So, with growth and assessment, a wise mathematician once said on the assessment side of things, hey, whatever's measured increases, and whatever's measured and discussed or reported, okay, like we do with our clients, increases exponentially. Okay, so whatever's measured increases, whatever's measured and reported increases exponentially. That's what we see with our clients. Okay, so you got to have measurement, number one, to track your progress and celebrate your wins along the way. But also, just by doing that act, you're going to see results on top of that. And remember, we're talking growth, but not for growth's sake, right? Calculated strategic growth to increase profitability, your free time, and to help you reach your goals.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you reminded me of something that needs to be mentioned. Decreasing your overhead is not just working on spending less, it's also collecting more. If overhead is defined as a percentage of your collections, if you increase your collections, there is a good chance you will decrease your overhead. Because, again, just because you are doing more dentistry doesn't mean your expenses go up, because those fixed expenses you mentioned, regardless of how much dentistry you produce, they stay the same.
Yeah. One last story to illustrate that point, Tony. So I had an office manager at one of my offices, and I realized she was in the wrong seat on the bus. Even though she had the experience, she'd been doing it for 10 plus years, she had the desire to do a good job, she just wasn't performing well. But I realized she had talent when it came to financial presentation and closing out the financial case acceptance, right? She was really good at getting treatment on the doctor's chair. So when I moved her and dedicated her to our financial coordinator role, and that's all she was responsible to do now, was to focus on keeping the doctor's schedule busy. That one change, with no change in overhead, by the way, but moving her to a different seat on the bus, led to a $50,000 increase in revenue 10 of the next 12 months.
Every year, our organization, our coaches, our trainers, our clients all assemble for our annual summit. This year's Sunrise Dental Solutions Annual Summit is being held at the Broadmoor outside of Colorado Springs, Colorado, September 11th through the 14th. And our meeting topics tend to focus around this concept of profitability, how we can address challenges that our clients are facing and are likely to face. So we like to be forward-thinking, to get out ahead of these things. Also, at that meeting, we do a great deal of networking. We're very proud of our community at Sunrise Dental Solutions. We represent some of the most successful dentists in the U.S. And like, these people love to mingle with other like-minded individuals who are ambitious, who are entrepreneurial, and who are doing some really special things in their dental practice. If you'd like to learn more about that meeting, if you'd like to learn more about what we do with Sunrise Dental Solutions, if you'd like to hear more from Dr. Chris Phelps, okay, the marketing master, then check out our website at sunrisedentalsolutions.com, or you can contact me directly at tony@sunrisedentalsolutions.com. Till the next time, profitability to all of you. Thanks, everyone, for being with us, and we hope to see you on future programs.
Yes, we really appreciate your presence and being here and your attention. And if you really got some value from today's program, please do us a huge favor and hit that like and subscribe button below. That will do us a magnificent service, and that will allow us to reach more people and spread this word, okay? So stay tuned, because we're not done with just this show. We have more shows coming. But look out on the horizon is coming a new audio podcast where we're actually going to be able to go deeper into all of the topics that we're discussing on our show. So what can you do to help us out there? Got a question that came to mind, something you really want an answer to or need an answer to or more clarification for? Well, do us a favor and go ahead and put that question in the comments below, and we'll make sure we address those on that audio podcast as well. So from Dr. Tony Feck and myself, we appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing your sun rise on future shows.